Welcome back to Liberty and Finance and Reluctant Preppers. We're delighted to have a first-time guest today. David Smith is the Senior Analyst at the Morgan Report. David, thank you for joining us this first time on Reluctant Preppers and Liberty and Finance.
It's great to be here, Duncan.
We've had your colleague, David Morgan, with us several times each year throughout the 7 years that we've been in practice of this since 2013. And we understand that you are going to be representing the Morgan Report at the upcoming Sprott Virtual Natural Resources Symposium later this month, July 22nd through 25th. So we wanted to have you on to talk about that and find out what you're going to be speaking about at the conference, and also get a lot of our viewers' questions that have been submitted for you answered during this session. So with your permission, we'll jump on into that.
That sounds good. And, I'm really looking forward to being at the conference this year. Last year, I was at Sprott, and I did the media day, worked with them on that, and then also introduced some of the presenters. So it's a real honor to be presenting myself this year.
Well, I'm just amazed that it's taken me this long to get to meet you in person this way, so I'm delighted to do that. I'm sad that we aren't going to be meeting really in person, because we had hotel reservations made there in Vancouver, British Columbia, to attend the Sprott conference, my wife and myself. And then when it got changed to a virtual conference, we'll have to wait to another time when we can meet each other in person, but hopefully that'll happen also soon. If you could be willing to tell our guests a little bit about yourself. You are the Senior Analyst at the Morgan Report. So what is your emphasis? What's your focus there and the main expertise that you bring to that position?
Well, I do a lot of the mining tours, go to check out the silver and gold and sometimes other metal type stories, check out what's going on and see what might be happening there. Also go to producing plays and do updates. And then I come back and write analyses on it and answer a lot of the subscribers' questions, before and after. And so it's really a lot of fun. I wrote a two-part essay on uranium this last year, which has been very well received a few months ago. And we discovered a play in the Caribou District, a gold exploration production play that's up about 500% so far since we released the report in March. So it's always a lot of fun to try to find an outlier and to try to find something where the people are really got something going that can really benefit our readership. And ideally do it in a way that's friendly to the environment, because that's becoming more and more of a concern, not only for the public, but for ourselves as well.
So looking towards the conference, the Sprott Virtual Natural Resources Symposium Conference, and by the way, folks, if you haven't already registered for that, remember, there's no travel required, there's no social distancing required, and no wearing masks or anything. You just sign up and you just show up. It's going to be from July 22nd for 3.5 days, and you'll find a link in the description of this video to sign up for it. But specifically at that conference, David, you are one of the featured speakers. So can you give our audience a sneak preview of what topic you're going to be addressing at the Sprott Virtual Conference?
Well, the topic of my presentation will be gearing up for the gold, silver, and mining shares epic bull run. And I believe that the premise that I'm basing this on, one of them is that we are in about round 2 of a multiple round epic run for these metals and miners that has the potential to exceed anything we've seen in scope and duration during our lifetime. So it's something to really get excited about participating in. And there's some elements about this that are different from anything we've seen before, which mean that for people that do their own due diligence and make good choices on the miners that they choose, there could be returns that would be far in excess of what would normally happen during a normal bull run, even the one that started in around 2001 or 2 and ran up to 2011. That was very profitable for people, but I think the potential on this one can be even more so as we move into what eventually will become a public mania phase, which we did not have in 2011, but which will take the better stocks and eventually even some ones that aren't that good up into the stratosphere. And our goal it will be to help people position on this and then also not overstay their welcome, because as you probably know, in most bull markets, most people end up riding it all the way to the top and all the way to the bottom. And we'd like to help people avoid that if they can.
Yeah, it's been a long 9 years or so for those who are sound money enthusiasts and who woke up as I guess I got pulled in a lot around that 2011 timeframe when it was like, whoa, this is just, silver and gold just kept rising and rising, week after month. And you started to see in every mall and every abandoned storefront in your town, we buy gold, or we sell gold. And it became finally part of the public mindset. And people were talking about it on the news. People were talking about, you saw ads during daytime television shows with all the various stars from the 1980s and 1990s were on the TV, the people that you recognized well, and were talking about establishing your own physical possession of metals, that sort of thing. So it became conversational. It became something that people were aware of. So you're saying that by the time that it's that widespread, by the time the entire population is aware of it or thinking about it or talking about it, is the time again to be taking a contrarian approach.
I think so. And, it was getting a bit frothy in 2011, and it was amazing that David Morgan called that top to within 2 days. And I sold a lot of my shares. I didn't sell the metal, but I sold a lot of the shares when it dropped, not thinking that it would go as low as it did or last as long as it did. But I'm glad that I offset some of them. But the reason that I didn't get out entirely is because we had not seen the full measure of that kind of a public mania. Yes, there were examples of people doing exactly what you said. I remember one guy had a presence saying that I sold my house and I bought silver with it. I sold with the mortgage money. And so we were seeing individual examples of that. But I think this will be a more synchronized global public response across the globe for all sorts of reasons and for all sorts of financial misallocations that countries across the world are making that are pronounced almost by an order of magnitude beyond what took place in 2011. So I think as it builds out, and as we have questions about the regular stock market itself being a good investment venue and the dysfunctionality of the different governments and their financing, people are going to see that the gold and silver and the miners are maybe the last best opportunity to retrieve what they might have lost or to protect their own capital, and they'll flock to this, and especially the millennials. Like you're seeing this going on at Robinhood now, which is a commission-free house where a lot of millennials are investing their money. And when they blow out of that, they're going to look around for the next big thing, which will be the miners. And I think we'll see a huge participation by them in the next couple of years as well, too.
So the Morgan report, you and David Morgan, among others, have been already doing that diligence, tilling that soil, doing the research, doing the visit to the sites for all this time. And now suddenly you guys are the spotlight is gonna shine in that sector, and you're anticipating that there's gonna be a lot more public interest than there has been over the past decade.
I think there really, really will be. And none of us, anyone who says they thought it would be over or they said it would last this long, they're not really speaking the truth, because none of us thought that we would see the 45% decline in gold and the 70-some% decline in silver. And the very best mining stocks on the planet were down 80 to 90%. A lot of the ones that weren't so good blew away. So the thing is, we survived. And what gives me heart is what Rick Rule likes to say. He said, you survived the pain, now get ready for the gain. And I think that we're going to see that. It won't happen tomorrow as a rocket launch, but it's building, and it will happen in a way that I think surprises people, not only in terms of the height that the metals and miners rise, but the duration, which should last between 3 to 5 years and perhaps longer, but certainly several years I think we've got ahead of us of irregularly higher prices. And for people that do their own due diligence, and that's what we do at the Morgan Report, we try to inform people so that they can add to what they already know and then go ahead and make their own decisions. We don't try to make decisions for them. That's their responsibility. But we try to support what they do and help them become more knowledgeable.
Something you said a few minutes ago really intrigued me, and I want to drill into a little bit further. Anyway, and that was, you said that some of the structural misplacements of capital, that sort of thing, that were present back in before the 2011 run-up in metals may in some ways be an order of magnitude more extreme now. What specific things are you thinking of in terms of sovereign debt around the world, or currency debasement, or what kind of things are you talking about?
I think all of the above and more. There was an opportunity for people that believe in free markets in 2008 to kind of let things run their course, and the people that got us into this pay the price and have a kind of a flushing out of the system. That's what you need every so often in any kind of a system, whether it's a wildlife system where Forest fires happen from time to time to burn out the underbrush and reinvigorate the soil. And in an economic process, you need to have the businesses that expanded unwisely to go down the tube, and a lot of the banks were involved in the brokerage houses that were leveraging all these different types of collateral deposits that weren't collateralized, and they should have paid the price, but they really didn't. And so when the Fed started pumping money, they basically put all that money back into Wall Street, and they put a lot of it into foreign banks that had overextended themselves. So there was no cleansing effect. And what that did also, in addition, was to almost tell these people that they would be covered no matter what they did. So they went ahead doing the same things at a more intense pace. And the leverage in some of these banks is 100 to 1. I mean, that's insane. A 1% change in their asset available can wipe them out. So, and this has happened all over the world. And then in addition, individuals went into greater debt, encouraged by the government. And so we have this situation now where we're really in a bad place, in a much more significant danger zone than was the place in 2008. And that's going to create destruction of currencies, destructions of monetary systems and institutions, and take us into a situation where we'll end up with a new paradigm, part of which will be, I believe, the reestablishment in some form, perhaps digitally, of gold and silver as money, and the reestablishment of cryptocurrencies, and a whole new way of looking at things, and a cleansing of the body and the economic and the social politic in the major countries around the world. So the stakes are very high, and yet I believe in a kind of guardedly optimistic sense that we can come through it if we let nature take its course and guide it a little bit so that people can express themselves in their true fashion with their businesses and their investments in a way that makes a lot more sense than we've seen in the last 20 years or so.
Well, I'm certainly concerned, and many people are, that nature has not been allowed to take its course. It was not back in the global financial collapse of 2008, 2009, 2000, where we had the bailouts. I mean, I remember a country song at the time, "I Need a Bailout," talking about the plight of the individual. People lost their jobs, people lost their homes, and it was the banks that were bailed out. And now we're seeing the Fed and other central banks picking winners and losers. They say that 41% of the businesses that advertise on Yelp are going out of business and not coming back. A lot of small businesses, a lot of real estate owners of small, like VRBO and Airbnb, that kind of thing. So, but it's all the businesses flowing upstream to the huge behemoths, Amazon and so on. Another couple of things you mentioned, you talked about you're anticipating stresses on the systemic banking system, or how those are greater now with derivative exposure, all that sort of thing. Alistair McLeod, analyst from goldmoney.com, has put out there for the last 3 months and asserted even over this weekend that he anticipates a systemic banking failure or crisis within even this month of July, and a currency crisis by the end of the year. So that's, I guess it's just underscoring what you're talking about, but things are an order of magnitude worse than they were even at the last global financial crisis. And then one more thing you talked about banks that have gone even further, extending themselves, like instead of a 9 to 1 or 10 to 1 reserve ratio, maybe 99 to 1. And actually the Federal Reserve announcing, of course it's because of the emergency measures of COVID relief or whatever, that banks have now zero reserve requirements. So that's essentially infinite ability to expand their balance sheet depending on without having collateral in hand. So there's certainly a lot of data that's pointing to the extremes that you're talking about being the setup. I guess the thing that a lot of us are concerned about is, will nature actually be allowed to take its course, and will we actually come out with anything closer to sanity after this, or is it going to be just more interventions piled upon more interventions at larger and larger amounts? But what I hear you saying, I think, is that regardless of that, precious metals are going to be a foundation underneath that isn't going away.
They absolutely will. They've never gone to zero in value in thousands of years of use, and they've always been the refuge of people that look ahead and want to preserve their wealth, their insurance first and profit second. And the point you made about the banks now needing zero reserves, that is really stunning. I read about that last week, and what most people don't know is that after 2011, in addition to what you just said, the bank laws were written for our own individual little accounts, that the bank can bail in. In other words, if they get into trouble, they can take money out of your account legally to help them out, like they did in Cyprus, which some people lost half of their accounts and they couldn't do anything about it. And also, they can prohibit you from taking out more than a small amount a week if they want. So all these things are in place that if their game plan fails, which ultimately looks like it has a very real chance of doing, guess who's going to pay the price? And so people that have not prepared ahead and do not believe something like this could happen, they'll have no options whatsoever. And so our goal here and your goal, part of it at the Sprott conference, is to educate people and to get them to prepare ahead and to not be, looking at the bad side of things all the time, but realize that we're in a very dangerous place. And with the COVID situation bringing a new element in, which has weakened the body politic and our ability to socialize and to get around and to have, conferences and demonstrations and things, all these things are adding complexity to the mix. So we have a very complex system already that had issues with being in survival mode, and then you throw this in, and it really it just points to absolute unpredictability ahead. We're going to see things that we can't imagine, and what we need to do is prepare as we can to build relationships in order to survive this.
Something you just said reminded me, I've spoken as an independent bullion representative for Miles Franklin over the past 4 months now with so many individuals. Most of them are later career stage and retirement age who are they're really concerned about protecting the funds that they currently have, that they've saved up lifelong in many cases, either in savings accounts, 401ks, IRAs, and they're really concerned about their ability to maintain their a livable standard of living for the rest of their life, or to have any kind of retirement, be able to have a financial future. And because of these risks that you just enumerated in the banking system. And the one that you just touched on about capital controls and limits, I had held up in an interview we had on our channel about a year ago, a actual mailing card fold-out thing that I got from Capital One, where we had an online savings account because it gave her higher interest than our local bank. And they were saying, for your safety and for your convenience, we're establishing transfer limits, which we can change at our discretion in order to effectively maintain stability and ensure the integrity of the system, or whatever. They gave these really good sounding words like, oh, we're enhancing your account, we're improving your safety, and all this stuff. If you really boil it down, they're saying, we're going to cut off your ability to access your account or to restrict it to some amount that we determine in the future at a time of our choosing and the amount of our choosing. You're welcome. Have a very good day.
It's really galling, and it's more so because the people that are telling us what they're going to do for our own good are the people that have put us in this position in the first place. We didn't ask for it. I can remember not that many years ago as a younger man talking to my neighbors who were retiring from a lifetime of public service or private service, and they were going to clip coupons. They were going to live largely in addition to Social Security, but also on the interest that they got from 8 or 10 or 12% bonds that were going to layer out over time. And the Federal Reserve has taken interest rates to the point, in some cases, to negative rates, which is insane, that no longer occurs. So the middle class has lost a pillar of their ability to provide for themselves by saving ahead, by buying bonds, and that yield is no longer available to them. In some cases, it's a fraction of a percent. They're being forced either into more risky investments, the same with pension funds, or they are forced to stand aside and watch their money devalue every year at several percent a year. And the government actually comes out and says, we want inflation of 2 to 4% a year, which means every dollar in your pocket becomes worth 4 cents less at the end of each year. So they're actually telling us what they're doing to disable our ability to save for themselves. The good news is gold and silver, we believe, are such an asymmetric trade that you don't have to sell your house and buy gold and silver. You have to put a certain amount in to protect yourself from an insurance standpoint, and the potential rise will be enough to help you not lose so much if things go the way we think they are, rather than being wiped out as all these policies that they go against common sense and human nature as they unravel. And you can be, we're all going to lose something, but we try to lose less, and we try not to be wiped out like the people in Venezuela, the poor people there. 2 years ago, I have heard that 1 ounce of silver would buy 6 months of food in Venezuela. And Argentina is heading down the same path, by the way. They've got 50% inflation now. Anyway, an ounce of gold would buy a house. So, and the same thing would have happened in Zimbabwe. And in Argentina, with 50% inflation, people are having themselves be wiped out again for about the 4th time in the last 50 years. Imagine how depressing that is to people that are honest and save and work and put their money in the local currency, only to see it absolutely destroyed and a set of new zeros added every few years.
So in contrast to those late career stage people and retirees that were primarily the ones who were contacting me over the past quarter, I've had conversations this week with younger people. One was a new college grad. Another one is a young business owner who said, hey, I'm getting really nervous I want to make sure, I want to have a financial future, and I'm not trusting either necessarily the banking system or the stock market as being the foundation of that. So to me, that's a light bulb coming on for me, is that the awareness, as you mentioned, is shifting already, is starting to the younger career stage folks. And I think that's a sign of the start of something really big, because that hasn't been there in the past. The demographics that are typically interested in this topic has been later career stage and retirees, and now we're seeing that interest starting to shift into younger. And I think that's a good sign. It's a healthy sign. It's unfortunately a sign of evidence of the reason for great concern. But I'd like to, with your permission, turn to some of those questions that have been submitted by viewers ahead of your arrival here. We have one from Charles Cherry who says, how long will silver stay cheap relative to gold? I know it's speculation, but what are your gut feelings on this? Do we have the summer before prices start going ballistic? Also, what are the best gold, silver Okay, this goes on. There's 3 questions here. So how long do you see silver staying cheap relative to gold?
I think, then again, that is impossible to predict. It could stay that way for a couple months. It could change tomorrow. And that's the problem with trying to anticipate something like this that is so explosive and potentially pyrotechnic. The thing to do is, when you have the funds and you know that you have a dealer where you can buy from to get the real thing, not some kind of an artificial look-alike like the Chinese were peddling recently with copper, with gold plating covering it to the tune of several $1 billion that they use for collateral. But when you have that money and you decide it's in your interest to get that investment portion, or I should say that insurance portion, go ahead and make the purchase, and don't try to nickel and dime it down to get to a point where you think it's a better buy. I had people tell me earlier in the year, that when silver got to $12, which they were sure it was going to do, they would buy it, but they weren't going to pay 16 or 17. Well, it went to 12 here earlier this year, but you would pay about $20 to $22 because the premium went through the roof, if you could find it. So that's the sort of thing you would be better off to be months ahead or weeks ahead of when the change might take place than one day late, which would be you would not recover from it. It would probably not be available at any price. That's the great danger of waiting until you think it's going to happen, because you won't have a chance to react.
Yeah, I can relate to that personally. My wife and I wanted to purchase some silver early this year, and our local coin shop was selling. They said they had 2 monster boxes of American Silver Eagles for $250 over spot. I thought, I'm sure I've seen that advertised at lower premium than that recently. I think I'll pass on that. That sounds a little rich to me. And now it's like, oh my gosh, what did I pass up? So anyway,
that is true. And if I could just go back one before your next question. About what you mentioned about the millennials. This is where this is the largest demographic group in American history. It's bigger than the boomers. So they're going to have an outsized effect, whatever they do, on whatever they get involved in. And I think it's probably true in Canada, too, for that demographic, or something similar. And the millennials are, as you say, are getting more interested in the story of the miners and the metals. And in addition, they're all on top of the idea of cryptocurrencies. And with the cryptocurrencies out there that are being backed by gold and silver. And as you know, Sprott has a vault chain gold and a vault chain silver cryptocurrency. And there's another one that the Morgan Report has looked at called the Logue Project, which is being backed by silver and gold. I think that's going to be one of the unexpected demand drivers that as people either can't get the physical metal right away themselves or are more comfortable with the digital aspect, start going into the digital backed gold and silver cryptocurrencies like the Sprott vehicle and like the Logue vehicle and others. And that's going to create demand for the physical metal to back that because it has to be purchased to back those digital assets. And I think that's a demand driver which now is almost non-existent. But I predict that within a couple of years, if the millennials move in the way I think they're going to on the digital assets, that you may see that become a driver that increases to the point that there's even less physical gold and silver around to hold in your hand than there is today.
You mentioned a few minutes ago about the inclination that we may have to wait for better premiums, that sort of thing. Donald Robinson asks, he says, premiums on silver egos are like $5.99 and up, while sellers of gold are offered 2.5% to sell, so that results in an 80-to-1 ratio, not a 99-to-1 ratio. What do these prices say to you about metals and available above-ground inventories?
I don't think they say much of anything because you're comparing apples to oranges in a sense, looking at the silver to gold ratio on the particular buy-sell in a physical department, let's say, or a store, versus the global silver to gold ratio, which, as you know, is around 100-to-1 now. It's been as high as 125 or whatever. So I would look at, if I wanted to be informed about what the actual gold-silver ratio is, I would take those global figures and look at that rather than to try to construct some kind of what I would feel would be a temporary, artificial, almost one-site-only relationship where I was buying the gold and silver as this person just wrote about. I think that would be misleading in regard to what's actually taking place globally.
I know that because I've been addressed by some specific investors who are concerned about wanting to maybe swap some of their existing gold for silver. That's why they get involved in looking at what it would actually take. In other words, if you look at the spot price ratio of 100-to-1 currently, that doesn't mean you can take 1 ounce of gold into the shop and come home with 100 ounces of silver, because there is going to be some premium difference. And you mentioned in one of your answers that you offered to our online viewer some insight into what that means when you start to see that physical separation where premiums are higher, where the actual price to take possession of the metal is significantly higher than the spot price, that it's actually telling you something.
It really is. And, you know, further drilling down to the core aspect of the gold-silver ratio, even if it was 80 today, if it really was globally, or 70 that we were talking, it would still be higher than the norm for the gold-silver ratio, which often oscillates around 40 or 45-to-1. And then in terms of the 1980 bull run, actually went down briefly to 15-to-1. And so we're in rarefied areas here that normally do not prevail. And I don't think a person should get hung up on, oh, it's only 78-to-1 now. I've missed the opportunity and I shouldn't exchange. They should say, you know, the higher it is, the more gold they should feel comfortable exchanging for silver, if that's what they're looking for to play that ratio. But the idea of having it in hand and having the coverage, you should still want to be acquiring it, even if the ratio is considerably lower than what you think gives you your best shot at the big returns.
You mentioned way back in the beginning about how some of the field studies that you've done and the visits to specific industry clients and that sort of thing has involved uranium. And there's a specific question here. Several viewers entered related questions about concern about the potential for massive flooding threatening the Three Gorges Dam in China. Gina Daniel and Corpus Soph have both submitted questions about that. One says, China's Three Gorges Dam could threaten 40% of their GDP and then be the next black swan event. Another one says, there's a number of experts who said the Three Gorges Dam, if it should fail, could flood through 400 to 600 million people in their cities, and 66 nuclear power plants are based. Pray this won't happen, but wonder, could this affect uranium stocks or the price of uranium?
You know, ironically, we got a question very similar to that from a person in the United Kingdom today, one of our subscribers, and he expressed some of those same concerns and a couple of others. And I responded to him, I guess, 20 minutes before we started our interview today. And I told him, I said, first of all, I don't have a sense of how that would affect the uranium prices. I don't think anybody does. And I don't know whether those 66 reactors I doubt that they're built on the floodplain or near the rivers. I just don't know. But if the Three Gorges Dam was breached, it would be an incalculable disaster for humanity in China. Literally millions of people could drown, and that's not an exaggeration. I don't know what effect it would have on the uranium facilities there. It would not be positive. It would certainly probably have a negative effect until we got a sense of just what the real effect was. But the Three Gorges Dam, is, if you want an example of the worst feng shui that you could ever imagine, which in Asian philosophy is you build things in a way that accords with nature. You don't build your house so that it faces the wind coming in at you, and you come down a little bit so that the big storms go over your roof. Well, putting that dam there on the Chang River, which means long river, that was one of the most hubristic things I think that human engineers could do, because that river rises and falls as much as 100 feet a year. And even in normal times, the erosion that takes place every year is becoming problematic. It's filling up the lake with silt, and it's causing instability on these areas that are being eroded away, these villages and cities that are literally being eaten away as the river comes up and goes down every year. And so that is creating instability. In addition, there's a massive geological feature on an angle that is potentially could slip into the lake at any time. I mean, this thing is huge. It's got faults in it. If it did that, even at low water, it could cause the lake to breach. But if you had this situation going on now with this massive flooding, and I've seen some of the videos, they're horrific, that could not only breach that dam, but tear out the dam to the point that I don't know if it could be repaired. And it would be horrific. And the other major river in China, the Yellow River, is known as China's sorrow. If this ever happened, I think that the Jiang River would take that moniker away from it. And it's potentially so damaging that the ancient mandate of heaven, which the people of China have in their hearts when they feel that the ruler should go because they're not doing the right thing, I think that would have the potential of calling into question the current leadership of China, even though this dam was built before Xi Jinping took power. So the costs and the potential here are absolutely horrific, beyond even any concern about the uranium itself.
And it just sounds like the potential for loss of human life and tragedy surrounding that is just it dwarfs any economic considerations that we could even have about it, in addition to everything that we talked about. One more question before we let you go. Dear Fly Guy says, Mr. Smith, if the dollar is being printed without regard for its inevitable inflation, then its failure is likewise inevitable. Should we little people then be dumping our paper assets now and putting almost all of our fiat currency into physical precious metals as fast as we possibly can, while physical precious metals are still to be found?
A two-part answer to that. First of all, as David Morgan and others have conclusively shown, every paper currency that has ever been created has always gone to its intrinsic value over time, which is zero. And in a sense, ours has already done that because it has 2% of the purchasing power it had in 1913 when the Federal Reserve was created. And even since the 1960s, it's lost 80% of its purchasing power since then. So it will go to zero and below that probably. But here's the second thing. I think it is unwise for people to panic and to put all their fiat currency into gold and silver. They should put enough in at reasonable prices to give them an insurance policy. And as we said before, it's an asymmetric trade, which should protect you beyond the value that you put in substantially. But you need paper currency in daily exchange and things like this. But as you can afford more, put more in. But don't go all in. Have a sleeping level. And, we all have a different setup. That's why, David and I are not financial advisors, and we don't give financial advice. But what we say is consider certain things. And go in, look at your own circumstances, your circumstances for risk, for tolerance, how long you plan to be in a certain situation, your age, your financial background. And that's why some people probably shouldn't be in mining stocks at all. But everybody should try to have a certain amount of hold in your hand, gold and silver that they're comfortable with, and put it in a secure place as insurance just in case things really go poorly, which is quite possible going forward.
We've been speaking with David Smith, the senior analyst at themorganreport.com. David, you're going to be one of the speakers on the main stage at the Sprott Virtual Natural Resources Symposium, and I believe we've got you to come to the Miles Franklin booth right after that for an after-show briefing and question and answer from attendees who have submitted questions during your presentation, so we could talk to you right afterwards. We're going to work that out with the conference organizers. And folks, if you want to sign up for the Sprott Virtual Natural Resources Symposium, look at the link in the description of this video. David, thanks for joining us this first time.
It's been a great talk, and hope to see you again.
If you've decided that now is the right time for you to protect your family's financial future by acquiring physical precious metals, gold and silver, I'm delighted to let you know that I have now become a licensed dealer's representative for Miles Franklin, one of the oldest and most trusted names in bullion dealerships. And we can provide you with physical delivery to your personal possession or to professional vault storage or precious metals IRAs. Just email me at libertyandfinance@protonmail.com, and please include your name and phone number in your email to libertyandfinance@protonmail.com. We'll get right back with you and find out how to best meet your needs so that you can either begin or increase your acquisition of physical precious metals now and protect your family's future starting today.